So we got a cool video of what cupping of the left wrist can look like. And this can be sometimes a really tough one to see on camera because it's not as drastic as a bowed wrist, a la Dustin Johnson, John Rahm. And when people talk about some of those, face angles and whatnot that we want to try and get to and having more of a closed position, a lot of it is trying to eliminate this cup in the left wrist. And what we're going to see here at the first positional check, we're doing pretty good. Um, we're going to zoom in quite a bit because we're going to really look at where the emblem of the left hand is. That's going to be our kind of our best analysis. And this is actually a really good angle to see the transition from the first positional check up to the top of the backswing, how that cup is going to influence having the toe of the club pointing down towards the ground, and inevitably going to have to require a lot more wrist flexion or getting the hand into the opposition to release, which is why it tends to be a more handsy swing. And so what we're starting to see is kind of a little bit of a cup. And as we come through into the next position, we're going to see from here that, again, the same kind of cupping is going to happen. But most importantly, we can see how this emblem is almost coming straight at us here. And as we come towards the next few frames, we can see how that emblem starts to rotate in towards the body. And eventually, it's now running kind of back over the back and shoulder. And so that's the twisting motion. From here, we need to keep this angle in the left wrist. We need to keep kind of that feeling. And if we keep that in a drastic way, we're going to get to a Rahm and a Dustin Johnson position. But we want to think about having that emblem when we come up into this position here to almost feel like it's actually pointing behind us. And so right now we're pointing basically the other direction. Now, if it's straight behind us, that's obviously exaggerated. So we're trying to find some kind of a middle ground. But this is going to allow a lot of things. The first thing it's going to do when you have that position is it's going to make the arms feel like they're really stretched out behind us. And that's going to help with a ton of things, not only in our ability to turn correctly, but also to have more width and depth in the swing. When we start to have our cup happen here and we start to get much more handsy, and what ends up happening is the club comes in towards the body. And so this is a position where you end up getting really stuck and having to use a lot of the upper body to turn, to try and get the club into a position that you would, look from behind and think, okay, that looks pretty good. And you have a tendency to have to overswing. So when we come to the top, we can just see how much that rotation in the wrist has caused the toe to come down to kind of what we're expecting for position. And so when we get all the way to the top, this is that overswing. We're seeing kind of a good amount of extension throughout the back and a good rotation. But if we look in relationship to how much the legs and the hips have kind of moved to the upper back, we're going to have a really hard time having, the hips proportionally not rotating as much as the back over rotating. Inevitably to come down, the back's going to have to rotate extra to try and speed up because the sequence goes from the bottom up with our legs. And so if we don't have the sequence starting with our legs and we have to rotate less, then that usually means the hips stop and then the upper body really has to take forward. And so a lot of these things aren't necessarily fixed with the cupping of that left wrist, but it can definitely help you get into a better position to correct a few other positional checks between our hips and our upper back. Coming down, we want to start to see that emblem point down towards the ground and starting to get into that kind of cleared and impact position. And we can see from here, we still have a lot of wrist extension going on. We haven't even gotten close to a position for impact. And so this is why, as we get down, we're going to get really, really steep because we need that club to come over to help the rotation because we're trying to have the toe swing around in order to square it up. And so we go from a position where those hands are right about here. I think that'll be a good one. We could see how much, again, we're still pointing up and away from us here. Then now we're going to rotate and come all the way through, and we can see our finish, how much now it's coming down. And so it's good to have rotation, but we're having a lot of hands rotation going through. And the one interesting thing I saw on this too, I'm not exactly sure if it's just the camera or whatnot, but it almost looks like we have a little Vijay Singh lifting the right pinky. I don't know if this is intentional or maybe this is a cause because the right hands are having to flip so much that we're not trying to have as much. And so we're trying to decrease the pressure right hand. That was a big swing thought that Vijay Singh had. If you can decrease the amount of right hand action, we're not going to have as much of that flip. And so maybe that's what happened instinctually, or the hands are just really going that fast that we're flipping over. But otherwise, good balance. Try a couple of things there, but not a bad swing whatsoever.